Praveen has done me a favor. So when I was speaking with him on the session, he told me that there is a very good panel, and I also looked at people who have tremendous experience, which made me a little anxious. So he said, don't worry, sir, you only have to ask questions. So that tells him about how much he thinks about my capability. The other thing he told me is that you don't worry, वैसे भी session after lunch hai. So I do not know what he meant. And if you see, he also offered me some tea so that I at least don't sleep. And you know, I also realized that out of the 7 people here, 5 of us are chemical engineers. One of them is a mechanical engineer. One of them is a chemical engineer, and one comes with a finance background. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that when chemical engineers get together, they become chemists with engineers, and they become engineers with chemists. With finance, they can become both, they have no problem. Finance people think chemical engineers don't understand finance anyway, and engineers think finance people don't understand chemicals. But that was on a lighter note. Both of them have been extremely well involved in the chemical business, and I'm sure we'll have a great discussion and lots to learn. So, whilst we will get a lot of knowledge from our very esteemed, very good speakers, you know, I was thinking about something that we've been going through. We have been going through a time of wars. And, you know, the last kind of war that we saw was in the period 2015 to 2019, which was the Syria war. And of late, all of us are seeing a war which is the India-Pakistan conflict, Israel-Iran conflict, the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And made me think that how drastically just the nature of war has changed in 5 to 6 years. So essentially in this war, you saw a huge amount of use of cyber warfare. You saw a huge amount of use of AI. You saw drones, which were actually sometimes printed by hobbyists using 3D machinery. And they were integrated with real-time satellite inputs. Not only that, crowdsourced intelligence. So basically all the videos, photos being put up everywhere, AI is analyzing to create information. And lots of other things which you are aware of. But the thing is that what was possibly unbeatable just 10 years ago is irrelevant today. So if you would imagine that the number of troops that you have, probably even nuclear stockpiles have relatively become irrelevant. And this has happened in, say, 5 to 6 years. I spoke about Syrian war. You didn't see anything like that. And, you know, change is happening so much faster. Again, I was thinking how fast is change happening. So from sticks and stones to spears and swords probably took 25,000 years. From swords to gunpowder and firearms probably took another 3,000 years. So it's down by a factor of 10. From firearms to then coming to, say, aeroplanes or air force took about 300 years, factor of 10 less in terms of disruption. And from aircraft to missiles took about 30 years, another factor of 10 less. And when we went on, what were the leading advantage about, you know, in 2019 is no more the leading advantage today, and that change happened in about 5 years. So disruption has been a geometric progression, and a geometric progression with a factor we may argue, which is anywhere between 5 to 10. Now the point is not whether I'm exact. The point is that our industry is also not untouched by that. So the tools of the game are changing, the rules of the game are changing. And the other interesting thing, you realize there are always great analogy between sports, war, and industry. And you'll see many trainers keep picking up examples from these places. So the other thing that you'll realize is, which is sometimes scary, sometimes great, and we've seen this happen all the time, that victories and defeats are fast, decisive, and total, unlike before. So, and the same thing applies to the chemical industry. Now, talking about specialty chemical industry, so I was thinking that why do we always call the same product specialty chemicals? So if you go back, you know, do we call a BlackBerry a specialty product now? No. It was specialty when it was there. Do we call gunpowder a specialty product? No. But do we call alkyl phenol ethoxylate specialty? Yes. Do we call phthalate specialty? Yes. Now, so in that sense, I think we need to understand that specialty is not about product. It is about a position at a point in time where something unique comes as an advantage either on account of knowledge or on account of process or on account of product or on account of application knowledge or even on account of feedstocks. And the reason it is important to understand that if we don't get that right, we'll continue to be a little deluded to keep thinking that all those products are specialty chemicals. And I think we are here for that journey as to how do we, unlock the true value creating potential of specialty chemicals, which will happen if we continue to dynamically take this position upwards. Now, we are all hearing about disruptions, so I am also going to talk about disruptions a little bit. So there are three major drivers of disruptions that we are seeing. One driver, of course, is sustainability. It is no more a fad, and I would like to re-emphasize that point more than I could at any point in time. So let me give you some data points which are very severe. So you may argue about whether they are exact or precise. So a study said that people in cities like Delhi on an average are losing about 11.9 years of their life. How expensive is that? No, we keep asking this question whether people will pay for sustainability. Now, how much will we pay if every member of my family has 12 years of his life shortened? Now, it may be exact, it may not be exact, that's another factor. Also, we talk about emissions, for example. The amount of global warming that probably we don't understand right now, because a lot of it is not happening in terms of temperature. We don't understand that. Our oceans are absorbing heat which is equivalent to 4 to 8 Hiroshima atomic bombs per second, leading to warming, leading to acidification, so on and so forth. The third thing, for example, is toxic load, something that is not talked about as of now, but even more severe than emissions in my opinion. The reason I'm saying it's more severe, apart from the Delhi figure, is that in the last 70 years, we've lost 50% of phytoplankton in the oceans, and that phytoplankton has the capability to absorb far more carbon dioxide than all our emissions put together. We've lost 50% of that. So the worry is not that we've lost 50% as much, that the toxic load continues to destroy it even today. What do we do about it? So, and there are many other things that I can continue to, talk about. And then there is obviously something that you've heard a lot about. Another disruptor, we talked about war, is technology. So the chemical industry, for example, is becoming more biotech, there is more enzymatic processing, there is more electrochemical processing. So the future of reactors over 10, 15 years will be completely modular, completely different, completely decentralized. That's happening. AI is enabling R&D in phenomenal ways. What used to take 10 years, is happening in weeks. It's happening because you are able to visualize, think of molecules with certain properties with a shortlisting exercise that is being done digitally. Lab experiments are being performed by robots. Right now there are humanoids being built, which in maybe 10, 15 years will cost you less than your car. And we think people is an advantage, low cost labor. It may not remain an advantage anymore. And it will affect us as well. So, and then there are very interesting things that are happening in terms of carbon capture, which is a positive. I think India is doing great work there. There's great work happening in terms of green energy, and India is very well positioned, it appears, to be a great source of relatively cheap or amongst the best costs of green hydrogen, which opens up completely new windows for the chemical industry as well. Now, the third one, which I will not necessarily elaborate and enough, is geopolitics. Now, the other thing that you find is that, therefore, the discussion in this group is about how do we look at India? How do we look at India's advantages? How do we look at India's aspirations? How do we look at India's needs? How do we also look at India's challenges to then take specialty chemicals to make it a value creator in a sustained way? You will find, and I'm sure you agree with that, you pick up the mission statement or the strategy statement of any company, you'll find a few words. One word you'll find is innovation. Everybody wants to be innovative. Another word you'll find is sustainability. Everybody wants to be more sustainable. Everybody wants to be specialty, and everybody wants to be global. So it's like saying that's not a strategy, because it's like saying, I want to have a great fielding team, I want to have a great set of bowlers, and want to have a great set of batsmen. The challenge is, how do we go about building it such that it is different from others, such that it helps us then move up the value chain? And I think we will ask questions of this team here to then give us some insights on how we take the chemical industry forward and the specialty chemicals industry forward in the true sense of the word. So my first question is to Prakash, who's here, and he's worked in many companies, many sectors, from Axo to pharma companies to Aarti to now to Aditya Birla, if I'm not wrong. And you know what I would, considering that you have such experience with strategy and a number of sectors, what do you think are, we like your views, and I'm sure you're doing this work with Aditya Birla Group also. In your view, what are the sectors which are going to see the fastest growth in the years to come? What are going to be the drivers there? And how does India get impacted by some of the global megatrends?
So actually, I mean, if we see a specialty chemical sector as a whole, there are a lot of sunrise sectors, those are coming up. And I think one of the thing is that battery chemicals, renewables. So battery chemicals, I believe will be growing close to 20% CAGR, and that will be driving growth. Renewables, renewable energy, chemicals that those are going in the solar, wind, and green hydrogen. This is another very interesting and upcoming sector. Another thing that is happening and probably will happen more in future is electronic chemicals. So though India is coming up, but we have a certain $1 billion or $2 billion opportunity there in next 5 to 7 years. I mean, apart from these three sectors, agrochemicals will remain a very important sector which will drive growth. And probably if we see this thing as a net arena, I think clean energy, that is one segment that is clearly emerging, along with mobility. Mobility, it's not only battery chemicals, it's the composites or the polymers, those are going into the electric vehicles to make it lighter. So all these things put together, I think, and along with the other specialty chemicals, those have potential to make things more renewable or green. I mean, probably making wind turbines more reusable, I mean, after end of their life. So these are the few bright spots. Those are there in this area. Those will be driving growth in the specialty chemical sector. And I think for Indian perspective, we will be integrating more our value chains to the global value chains. And in the same time, we'll be entering into the new segments from the Indian perspective, and probably in the future, next 5 to 7 years, we'll be dominating those value chains in the future, likes of battery chemicals, electronic chemicals, and chemicals, those are going into the renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's very interesting to see that if, correct me if I'm wrong, if we would have attended this conference 5 years ago, we would not have seen much mention of battery chemicals, mobility chemicals, transportation related chemicals, and so on. So the change is indeed happening. Allow me to now go to Suresh, who's been an industry leader, and he's worked in many organizations, and I may hazard a guess that whilst Suresh, you've worked in organizations which are very rapidly growing, have great opportunities to grow, but at the same time, all of them have also increasingly faced challenges which are about staying green. So what I would like to hear from you is, how do you look at creating value through green chemistry? Especially, how have you looked at, through your experience, what have been the challenges, and how some of those you've been converting to opportunities? More importantly, if you can leave some thoughts for the audience in terms of what are some learnings or suggestions which you might like to give to the audience in terms of their approach?
Yep, thank you, Rupark. Pleasure having you here. Good to hear you all. Now, this is one of the most important questions I get. Thank you for asking this one. I think we all are facing it every day. I would like to start on this. First of all, we always do bigger, important things on what and how part, right? Everything we do is what we are doing and how we are doing it. In this case, the most important is why part. Okay, why do we need to do it? With that, I'll start a small story or a joke, as you call it, and Praveen heard it from so many times, so he can close his ears. So it's like there are two planets who are talking to each other. One of them is Earth. So planet A and Earth. So Earth was not in a good mood. So planet A said, "Hey, Earth, how are you?" And Earth said, "No, I'm not feeling well." So planet A said, "Huh? Kya hua? What happened?" I said, "Listen, I have Homo sapiens at my planet." So planet A said, "Don't worry. I also had them. It will pass." Okay, so the why part is more important. Okay, it's not the planet. Planet will survive. It will remain as it is. Okay, it has seen a lot of things in billions of years. We as a species, we are not sure whether we are going to survive how we are going today. And possibly it is one of the most important things today because we are hearing nuclear war every day. This is also one of the things why we should not be having it, not directly related with green, but yes, I mean, if you want to survive all of that. So once we understand the why part, then we know we have to do it, okay? It is not because of the compliances. It is not because of the obligations. It is not because I want a nice pension fund as a private equity backing me, and that's why there are ESG goals. I mean, they all are important for sure, and we all go through that. But the important thing is that we all understand that this is our planet. We have to live here. Our kids have to live here, and possibly 10 generations later also we want them to live here, and that's why we want to do it. So once we understand this why, then we can see the challenges and then we know how to address them. I don't have answers to all the challenges, but I know what the challenges are. We are all facing it. I'm pretty sure there's nothing new I can say about it. The first and foremost challenge in chemical industry in India, we call it specialty, and Rupark very beautifully defined what the specialty chemical industry is. I struggle all my life being in specialty chemical, what exactly is specialty? Is it the EBITDA numbers which defines it? Is it the entry barriers which is define it? Is it the replacement of your product which defines it, or a combination of all? But the fact of the matter is, India, if I use this as a parlance, India is still almost 3% of the global specialty or intermediates market, as I would call it. Okay, so we are at about 34 billion today, and we might be 47 billion as the numbers are printed by 2028 or 2029. While the global numbers are today at about 1.14 trillion, going to be about 1.5 trillion. So we're about 3% or something of the global market. So we're still very, very small. But the good thing is that, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to grow. Now, in specialty chemicals specifically for growth and for especially on the green part, the most important thing is most of our plants, and I guess a lot of you would agree, and I've worked in a lot of industries and I've seen it not the first time, more than 60% of our plants in specialty chemical today are more than 20 years old. It is extremely difficult to go green and green chemistries and technologies once you are still struggling to be right on your baseline and to be most safer running as a chemical company. That's the biggest challenge, and we all face that. I am facing that, and I have no embarrassment in saying it. Second, and also a common thing which you all know, sorry, there's nothing in this to say new. Our R&D spend in India, specifically on percentage of a sale, is less than 1%. And a lot of us sitting here is even 1% is a luxury, okay? And you cannot get into new green chemistries till the time you start spending money on R&D. The third is, even if the companies who want to spend money on R&D and new molecules going green, they do not have enough possibility to attract talent because the talent is very scarce in this field in India. And we are ourselves doing it. We are currently, as a company, trying to hire a CTO, and we have put the whole world as a map that where we are trying to find anywhere we are going to hire that person. India is very difficult to hire currently the people in R&D of that level in which you go on your own new technologies and not just copying some technologies from from the West or anywhere else. The fourth thing is, we do not have enough green feedstocks. Now, you might be a very advanced company and you get into a lot of new technologies, but you still do not have the green feedstocks. The whole value chain has to be feedstock. Everything has to be green to become a green company or the green chemistry. And last, in my opinion, there may be a big list, but okay, I still have to pick some of them. The last but not the least is, and we talked a lot today in the earlier sessions about it, we are still very nascent in our usage of technology in the R&D side and in the manufacturing side, and especially in the R&D side. I mean, I've seen even today the most advanced companies, and I worked with some of them myself, so it's the first-hand experience. You can still go to the R&D labs and you see that people are writing down in their registers, and they go back their home and the registers are gone, and you never know what were the failed tests and what were the successful tests, and possibly a new guy come and he do all the failed tests all over again because you have no data. So data is minimum, the automation of the data, then the entire R&D has to be end-to-end integrated in terms of using of technology, automation, and then AI. Till the time we do not address all of these things very well, it would be very difficult for us to be pioneers, or even, I would say, to some extent, one of the countries where we see that we are one of the bigger names in the green chemistries. Now, I don't have answers to all of them, although Rupark told me that I also have to suggest some things. First is the time is limited, so I will stop here at the highlighting the problems, and possibly we'll have some solutions from this group by the time we close our session today.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. Maybe they can catch you later on for sharing the secret. But interestingly, thanks for reminding us that the bottom line of sustainability is life. And who are we to save nature? I think it is whether nature will have a place for us. And you spoke about value chain, which very nicely takes me to my friend Didi. But I have a complaint. He sent me a message today morning, please ask me relevant questions. We were together in one session last time. I sent him the question or some areas that he's going to talk about, and he didn't read it, so it was his fault. And I came to realize that today also he's not read it, but he batted well then. I'm sure he'll bat well now. So the strength that he brings is that he's worked across functions, from manufacturing to leading business to supply chain, and you talked about value chain. And I think, it also reminds me that I actually did this once, Didi, when I got confused between two people, and I asked the wrong question, and it was completely irrelevant for that person. But that person did a good job, and he moved on from starting with a ghazal and then moved on to Kishore Kumar is what he wanted to sing. And then I didn't have the question for the next guy because I had already asked him. So I simply asked him, what about your perspective on this? So obviously he had a different perspective. So, we managed. So, we were talking about the value chain, and obviously from sourcing to manufacturing to supply chain, that entire value chain delivers product, process, quality, safety, sustainability, service, reputation, and whatnot. And sometimes we do not give it enough time discussing that it happens right through the value chain. And we will not be able to fuel growth unless we are able to look at all parts of this chain. There is also saying that the chain breaks at the weakest link. So Didi, from your experience, how do you think we should be going about building a very robust value chain? When I talk value chain, right from sourcing, integrating technologies, making India future ready, before we start feeling that we can take on the world.
Thank you, Rupark. But before I go on to that, let me just talk about the Kishore Kumar and ghazal thing. It reminds me, it just stuck a note with me. When I had applied for a job in Unilever, it was HLL those days. So after several rounds of interview, my final interview was with the HR director and the technical director. And I assumed that the interview would be about technology, about chemical engineering, about God knows what. The interview went on for 1.5 hours. In that 1.5 hours, we discussed Kishore Kumar and Mohammad Rafi and why they are different, who's better and why they are better. So totally unrelated subject.
So people have been asking you irrelevant questions right from the beginning.
So you want to discuss about Kishore Kumar, Rafi? No.
So not my fault, I told you.
Jokes aside, but thanks, Rupark. And I think I was listening to Rupark, you, and to Mr. Suresh. A lot of things that I want to actually say has actually been covered. However, I must admit, I'm a bit of a traditionalist. When I say traditionalist, I'm just defining the boundaries. The boundaries say, unless there's a very strong, the change in the requirement of the product itself goes out. I'm assuming right now that my product has a use and it continues. So let's say, for example, to give an example, I work in a carbon black industry. So as long as there are roads, as long as there are cars, as long as there are tires, there's a use for carbon black. I'm starting with that process premise first. Tomorrow we have flying cars, I'm out of business. I understand that. So I'm starting with the premise that assuming that the cars are there, assuming that the roads are there, assuming that the tires are there. That's the premise. Now, how do I make myself relevant? So therefore, I'm saying I'm a bit of a traditionalist. And I believe if you look at the entire value chain to the end customer, every act that we do is to meet the customer's requirement. And any activity that we can do which can meet the customer's requirement, which can fulfill his aspirations, is what would be very relevant. Having said that, if the arbitrage for us is cost, I can very clearly say that you'll be out of the business very soon because there will be somebody else who will have, let's say, less appetite for profits, who will offer a much lower cost than you, and you'll be out. So cost cannot be the only arbitrage when you're dealing with a customer. So therefore now, since you mentioned about the experiences that I have had, and I just reflect back on the entire journey, what is it that we, from the value chain or from the supply chain perspective, bring to the customer, and how do we engage with the customer? How do we make sure that we mean something, we are relevant? So you did mention a lot of things about innovations, a lot of things about sustainability, and those are very, very relevant. But at the end of the day, I look back at my journey, and I look back at our organization. When I go and talk to the customer, what they want to understand from us is there going to be a reliability of our supplies? How reliable are we? Now, reliability is not only about our existence, reliability is also about how are our suppliers reliable. So therefore, it goes to RM sourcing. Are we diversified enough in RM sourcing? Or do we depend, we did speak about Syria, you did speak about what happened in Russia, what happened in Israel, Iran. Are we dependent only, let's say, on one particular region? Are we dependent only on one particular supply? If we are, then our customers are going to be little worried. So we have to diversify our RM sourcing, try and indigenize as much as possible. If possible, do your own RM production, if possible. If not, at least diversify it. That's one thing that we will do. Second thing I would say, there's a lot of merit in manufacturing excellence. So while I said the cost cannot be the arbitrage, but in terms of manufacturing excellence, what is it that you bring on the table to the consumer? Are you the most productive, most, you can say, your manpower productivity, is it the best or not? Because that's the only way you can actually sustain. Then you go into innovation. Like Mr. Suresh Kalra clearly said, is my R&D, is my innovation only about copying somebody, or am I bringing something new to the table? So am I working with the customer directly, understanding what their requirement is, what their aspirations are? And with those aspirations, do I come back and start looking at developing the products at our own end? Am I doing that? If I'm not doing that, then that's not innovation. That's just trying to copy someone. Am I engaging with the government agencies? Am I creating a forum where I'm helping in policy advocacy? So today, as an Indian supplier, we are competing not only in India, we are competing with global suppliers. Is my government or is my policy aligned to make sure that the industry in India is suitably rewarded, suitably supported? So while we keep on talking of value chain, we keep on talking of RM sourcing, we keep on talking of sustainability, we keep on talking of these things, but tomorrow, if the environment is not supportive or the policies are not supportive of the government, any China, any Russia can come and really kill you in the market, and you cannot do anything about it. Having said that, one thing which I very strongly believe, and I'm really passionate about it, is as an organization, and this is true for most of the Indian organizations, and I must say, I have never probably will be an overstatement, but I have rarely come across any organization which puts a lot of emphasis on the human capital. That's one area where organizations are generally not clear what is required to be done. So what organizations believe that human capital is a dispensable commodity. It cannot be that way. If you're looking at a long-term sustainability, if you're looking at a value chain which is sustainable, reliable, and which will stand with you in the worst of times and will give you a lot of profits in the best of time, you have to really invest in getting the right people, understanding the what is the right organization, and nurturing that talent. That I would say would be one of the things which people generally overlook when we talk of value chain. Thank you.
So thanks, Didi. Despite not having read about the topic, you made some very good points. I think it's very interesting to see that Indian companies are now loudly saying that cost arbitrage can't be the major source of competitive advantage. The other thing about manufacturing excellence, again, takes us back to wars. It's not about cost arbitrage, it's also about excellence, whether you talk about BrahMos or whether you talk about something else, irrespective of what your view is. And also the human capital, I like saying that we have to move out of the Karkhana mindset of 30 years ago. Real equity is people. 30 years ago, equity used to be loan and license. Lagat hai, loan hai, log laga do. So that has changed. I think India is taking time, but completely with you. Let me now move on to Anurag. Anurag, you've got a very interesting set of experiences. I think I'm really impressed with the overall experience the system gets, but particularly you, which includes having worked with Frost, which gives you a slightly different perspective. And as I mentioned, that many of us in our spec chems have usually spoken about surfactants, have spoken about coatings, personal care, pharma. That has been the story, and some other areas, crop protection. Now, we've started to talk about, specialty chemicals for power, transportation, e-mobility. So, I'm very curious to know if you, for laymen, if you start by very crisply just giving an overview of this opportunity, what are the drivers and how can India position itself well to build in this space?
Sure, and thank you and pleasure to be here. So as you mentioned, I worked in the consulting landscape, worked on the process chemistry side and core chemicals, petrochemicals and specialty space. But lately I've been working in the area which I would define as niche specialty and some of the segments which you spoke about, because those are some things which are talked about at a broad level. But if you drill deeper, what we see or what I am seeing from the past few years is some of the opportunities which are, untapped and which could be the future growth driver for this country particularly. So to elaborate more and in the way you asked, let me address this question by first looking at the mega trends which are impacting our country or are the key drivers for the GDP. Then I'll get on to, for those trends, what are 1-2 specific drivers, and then, as you mentioned, talk a little bit about what does it mean for the specialty chemical. So if you look at India right now, and these are 3 or 4 buzzwords which I call as mega trends. Number one, lot has been talked about energy. I think Mr. Singh also talked about, within the energy. So what are the drivers in energy segment? One is clearly the electrification. So if you look at the data from Government of India, it's official that by 2030, we'll have to double our power generation. We'll have to double the power generation, but we'll have to triple our distribution just to sustain the 6.57% GDP growth. So now let's come on to the specialty chemical side. What does it mean for specialty chemical? Your transformer, rotating motors, equivalent coating materials for that, specialty resins. There's a requirement for the new types of CTC transformers, which requires different flexible resins, which could be coated on it. So all that are niche drivers within the specialty chemicals, which will open up drastically the market there. So it won't run into billions of dollars, but it is still very significant portion of the future drivers in the market. So energy is one. Then the other aspect of energy which was touched upon was the renewable, which all of us know. Wind is huge, solar is huge. Again, all the electrical insulations required to make those functional are also one of the areas which will give a boost to specialty chemical. So one clear trend is the energy segment. Second, as we spoke about, is the transportation. So if you look deeper into the transportation, e-mobility is one of the key drivers. But India, if you compare it globally or even with China, US, Europe, it's very atypical market. When we look at e-mobility outside India, we're talking about electric cars, the four-wheeler. But if you look at in India, the adoption of four-wheeler is still limited. Because our infrastructure, the battery charging points, all of that is still limited. But the surprising part, which globally, if you pick it up, on the three-wheeler part, we are the only country across the globe which is most electrified, if I may say so. 60% of three-wheelers, and it's expected by 2030, almost 90% of three-wheelers will be electric in India. Again, huge opportunity for specialty chemicals players. So we personally, we as a company also work with some of these Olas, Ethers and all. One of the things which they are also working on is how do we, constantly innovate for the chemicals, resins, which could lighter the weight, and you'd work on the innovation engine or from the innovation on the product development for 6 months, and then they change the product on the 7th month. Then you come back on the desk, you work on, so that's the kind of things which are happening there, which you talked about, exponentially. The companies in this field are asking for solutions more from the R&D side. But it's a huge driver, and this is just the three-wheelers, and then once the four-wheeler hit the market, it will again open up some of the applications, including the battery chemicals which they talked about and the starting material for that. And I think there are 2 or 3 other mega trends. One is obviously the consumer market, the white good industry overall, that's also giving a huge boost to the specialty chemical. Then on industrial infrastructure side, we are seeing a lot of construction chemicals gaining traction, and even the basic residential construction, right now we are using brick concrete. With climate change due to sustainability reasons, you would need, different kind of construction materials so that if in Delhi the temperature goes up to 45, how you could still, resist the heat penetrating, so on and so forth. And on industrial side, I think data centers is one big boom. So if you zoom into data centers, all aspects of data centers, you'll find a lot of electrical and electronic insulation materials. You'll look into different types of flooring materials, all that is qualified as specialty. And then finally, the PLI schemes, is also one of the mega trends or the buzzwords, wherein if I zoom into back to the electronic applications, a lot of these electronic systems design manufacturers have been given huge amount of PLIs, or these are the system integrators who would eventually set up a shop in India looking at all these mega trends that will crack open the market. And then finally, one other very interesting application which has been talked about, energy storage, what are the solutions for that? Even if you do renewable right now, it's only 60% utilization through the day. The night shifts, where do you get the renewable energy? So you have to store the energy somewhere. And those energies can only be stored if we innovate or we deliver on some of the resins which are unique to our climatic conditions and our development. So if any company in this field can, address some of those issues, it can eventually open up, huge amount of markets. So yeah, I think it's little niche application, off-track application, which I'm talking here, but all these are directly in correlation with the mega trends and the drivers for what Mr. Modi or, our country talks about on day-to-day basis, yeah.
Thank you, Anurag. So reminds me of niche applications which all look small. McKinsey did a study, predicted how many mobile phones will be sold in 1999. I think they did the study in 1990, and apparently the amount of number of phones that they said will sell in a year were selling in a day by then. And I may be a little here and there on numbers, but broadly that happened. And we all know UPI and penetration of technologies, and it's also an opportunity for India to leapfrog. This sector will certainly see a lot of disruptions. For example, mobiles came from portable phones to pagers to Blackberries. You never know when they came and when they vanished. I wonder if hydrogen engine combustion becomes a reality, then a lot of work done in the other spaces becomes redundant. And the other area is that if we create so much of battery storage, to me, the bigger industry than the battery industry is to making it circular. How do you recover all that nickel? How do you recover all that cobalt? And that industry could be even bigger than the mother industry which creates that. So thank you for that input. Anurag, as I said, I have not seen this set of specialty chemicals being discussed. Change is happening and it's real. Yogesh, coming to yourself, I think first of all, I was, it's very impressive, the journey of Galaxy, and you've been leading development of the international business for Galaxy for many, many years. If I'm not wrong, your products go to something like 100 countries, so which is phenomenal, I think. And also you've been kind of looking at the vision for what will happen into the end consumer markets that you service and also guiding innovation in your organization. Particularly talking about the great success you've had in exports. It's phenomenal to be exporting to 100 countries, and I'm sure people would like to hear from you as to how the journey has been, what have been the success factors, and what are some messages in terms of how this should be approached. Because everybody's, growth will happen not only by when we talk about China plus one, or it has to happen if we are able to position ourselves well. And you've done that even when the whole China plus one buzzword was not such strong.
Yeah, thank you, Rupark, for a wonderful question. Once again, good afternoon to all of you. I come from an industry called home and personal care. It's a lovely industry. It's the morning when you get up, you have a toothpaste, or you have a shower, or you have a hand wash, or a cream, or a lotions, or whatever cosmetics or detergents which you use at your home on a day-to-day basis. We manufacture ingredients for the same. So this is what we are into this industry, and it's an amazing industry, seen evolution over decades in India. And this really happened in the post-liberalization era since 1991, when the Indian economy opened up. And when Indian economy opened up, of course, the duties came down, etc., and the growth was significantly very good since 1991. Now, what exactly transpired in terms of when you talk about success? Galaxy, in fact, it started in 1980, really completing 45 years on Sunday. For 10, 15 years, till the Indian economy opened up, we invested on three fronts. One was products, and as Didi rightly shared, it was about people. We invested in people. And of course, technology. From 1980 to 1992, we were only doing a groundwork. I don't think our turnover crossed more than 1 crore also at that point of time. But they were very clear in terms of visioning, what they want to do. If you see way back pre-1960s to 1980s, there were only two shampoos in India. One was a Halo X shampoo from Colgate. Another was Clinical and Sunsilk shampoo. Shampoo was considered to be luxury. Over a period of time, all these things became necessity. More so, the specialty ingredients, when you talk about, it was earlier only a soap from hair to toe. Today, for every part of your body, you have solutions in terms of cleaning and foaming. So every part of it. So you can imagine the way this industry has opened up and the opportunities which has been there. Coming back to the lovely question from where you were talking about. So first 10 years, we invested in understanding the products, understanding the customers, understanding the trends. We were very clear from day one, we will be a global player. We will be one of the most admired corporate in the world. When Rupark started the journey talking about how the era has moved in terms of the warfare and things caught up very fast in terms of last 3 years, 5 years compared to what is to happen, one of the most important criteria, not only for Galaxy, for any organization which I used to travel abroad, two things I learned traveling international business. One was safety. India doesn't consider much on the safety aspect of it. And second thing which I learned outside India traveling was courtesy. These two things are taken for granted in most part of the world. But when you travel in the Western world, most of the Europes and Americas, safety and courtesies are extremely high. That was the first thing. To have a successful business in any field, I always believe in the philosophy of how you build your house first. How is the ecosystem in the house? How is the leader in your house? How he drives it? Similarly, the important imperative is organizational behavior and organizational development. One of the most important part for a journey of a successful organization, of course, there will be a lot of products, innovations, cost competitiveness, supply chain, etc., etc. All these things, if not supported by a robust, in fact, Didi mentioned about human capital, I'm just expanding from there, in terms of organization building and organization behavior. The international world today not only looks, yes, of course, they will be with you on cost for some point of time, as he rightly said, and after that you will be outpriced or will be not competitive, then move to the next person. But why will they stick to a particular organization is how well do you conduct yourself. When you talk about conduct, it talks about how you scale your organization, how you build your organization. Because any good customer looks out for a good long-term sustainable partner. He will always ensure his good amount of business is one where he has a bankable, sustainable partner. He will have a ratio of his business. Some business will always be on spot because he will always like to optimize in terms of the various cost structures who are on tactical front. But to survive, the ecosystem is very important. And what did we build when we moved outside India? The first and foremost was safety. Today in our plant, we talk about SIL 3 level of safety, level of 3. Nuclear technology requires SIL 2. We are just one level below. We may not require that level of safety, but we understand if you have to be in international market, the first question that will come in safety. How well is your safety on that ecosystem? Plant, environment, people, etc., etc. Second most important thing, sustainability. Today people talk about sustainability in the last couple of years. We practiced sustainability 13 years ago. Since 13 years, we have been having every year annual report on sustainability. You can go on a website and check what have we done on sustainability in terms of, because we knew in case you want to be a global player, these would be the imperatives. What next comes? Governance. Extremely important. What does the global organization look for you? They don't want to someone in an organization which doesn't have a strong, robust ethics, value systems, governance. So the third pillar for anyone to succeed in international market, governance. Then you talk about, of course, global benchmarks in terms of quality. You cannot have a particular standard, but you need to have global benchmarks which meets the requirement of the global standards. Then you talk about productivity. And then finally, you talk to the business, to the customer on business. Hey guys, let's do business today. When he understands your philosophy, the core philosophy very strong in terms of safety, in terms of sustainability, in terms of governance, in terms of quality, in terms of productivity, then he says, I think I need to work with such an organization. And of course, of all these ones, the organization pillars are clear, then your innovation flows in, then your other ecosystem flows in to take care of the organization. Because the organization has to be backed up very well with all these imperatives. That's how when we had a journey in various markets, we tried to understand continent by continent, whatever the continent requires. And that's how we penetrated in various markets of business. One of the important thing which is to be mentioned here is the importance of techno-regulatory, which gets overlooked because people want to cut down on cost. As you always say, when you cut down on cost, you're going to meet with accidents, for sure. For some time, it may feel very fancy, it may be very nice, but today, what the globe is looking at, apart from all those things we talk about it, regulatory norms are absolutely stringent. And how many organizations invest in techno-regulatory aspect? It is an extremely specialized field. Once upon a time, there used to be continents used to talk about regulatory. Today, regulations are country-specific, which puts a lot of onus on a specialty player to export this product on country to country. And one mistake you do, I don't know what exactly happens. So techno-regulatory plays a very important role. So these are the constituents which enables any organization. Of course, it helped Galaxy also because we were very clear from where the founder members came. They were very clear for us. Business will come last, but if we do not fulfill the philosophy of safety, sustainability, governance, we will not do business where doesn't meet all those criteria. Having said that, you talked about one has to be cautious about it. Of course, one has to be very careful, one doesn't become complacent. Once you reach a particular level, if you start ignoring what the trends are there, what are the trends in terms of consumers, in terms of market, there where the challenges will happen. You'll have a lot of challenges. And one has to have his ears grounded to customers' philosophy and thinking. If you're not aligned with the customer strategy, it can pose a lot of challenge because customer can, as rightly said there can be a lot of disruptions overnight. Morning you get up, there'll be disruptions. How well are you picking up the weak signals? And you understand, because customer is not going to give everything on a platter. I want this, come on, let's do that. He will send you weak signals. It's very important, listen to the customer. When you engage with the customer, it should be more on the listening front. When you listen to the customer, you pick up the weak signals. When you pick up the weak signals, you ensure as much as possible, you try to fortify against your challenges or disruption in the market. So these are some important imperatives, I think, practices which we picked up. And that's how we created our journey. Today, we export to around 122 countries in the world. Smallest of the smallest country. We ensure we never say no to any customer in any part of the world. These have been the few of the talks.
Thank you, Yogesh. Very interestingly summarized. And I think the key thing is that whilst all of us keep them on boards in our office, how do we actually bring these things into the way the organization works? Of course, with the innovation that's happening in home and personal care, now a bathroom needs wardrobes because there are 5 kinds of cleaners. Absolutely. And 5 members of the house have different hair conditioners.
Absolutely.
So, which is something that is happening because of innovation, and I think that's also happening in India in terms of new concepts, etc. Now, last but not the least, let me move to Rajesh with a clarification that this is not a batting order. This is like it happens in a relay race. So, you have also worked in multiple organizations, which includes very good consulting stints as well with Accenture, Tata Strategic. And you spoke about a very interesting concept, which, maybe we'd not got a word to, which is something called specialty cut for commodities. And I can see that for Tata Chemicals, which goes back in existence pre-independence, which started with soda ash, and maybe there were specialties then, I think it's a big journey for such a large company to then start to look at new areas. And do tell us about how you are looking at identifying new areas. But I'm seeing many of us will also be keen to know, how do we find these niche value propositions in what seem like commodities, and you probably put a word to it saying the specialty cut in commodities.
So Rupark, I'll also refer to the comment that you made at the beginning, which is today's commodity were yesterday's specialty, or alternatively today's specialty will become tomorrow's commodity. So today, if you look at it, one could define our business, meaning Tata Chemicals business, primarily consisting of commodities. But let me just, talk about the journey of, some of the products that we have. Let me start off with salt. Now, salt has been around for ages, for millennia. And when you say that, it's a specialty, it means that you have invented or discovered something which meets a specific need. While the product might have been known, for a very long time, but the moment you discover that, at least for that moment, it becomes specialty. So if you look at salt, the journey, we started this process of making salt from a process called as vacuum, crystallization and drying. And at that point, the specific need which was catered to was, otherwise, earlier the salt that one would get would be the, the solar salt, which was not very pure, not very clean, not very hygienically packed, etc. And when we created this salt, it addressed that specific need. So at that point in time, it kind of, one could say that, it was a specialized cut from an existing commodity. The next cut was when we introduced the iodization part of it. Because when you do that, you again address a very specific need, which is a health requirement of a very large population of the country, where there was iodine deficiency, which created a lot of health issues. So when you do that, you again specialize what erstwhile was a commodity. So that's really the journey. And if you today, look at it, salt per se, there are different kinds of salt, including, I'm not just talking about the physical, the chemical part of it, but even if you look at physical, we have salt coming in different shapes and forms, like for example, salt tablets or salt pods, which again could be used for certain applications, like water softening or, in laundry areas, etc. In addition to that, we can have different grades of salt. So you have, more and more purified cuts of salt. So at one cut would be, let's say, the pharma grade of salt, which goes into pharmaceutical applications. So that's again a specialized cut, coming out of a commodity. And nowadays, one also talks about ultra pure salt, and this is the age of electronics. And when we talks about, chemicals which go into the electronics industry, be it semiconductors or otherwise, there you require chemicals, which are, again, meeting some specific needs. And to meet those needs, you need salt to be ultra pure. So, it's not, I wouldn't want to kind of bucket chemicals into saying that, these are commodities and these are specialty. You actually need to look at it from an application standpoint and then say that, is it meeting a certain specialized need? And then it becomes a specialty. Let me take a second example, which is of sodium bicarbonate. Now, again, as a chemical, bicarbonate has been around for millennia, right? But then somebody discovers a way of making it, synthetically, which is a solvay process. And then, the journey starts. And today, if you look at it, we have the commodity grade, which is, one could call technical, which goes into a lot of industrial applications. But we have also innovated and created, multiple specialized cut of it. For example, one which could go into the feed industry, one which could go into the food industry, which are slightly, differentiated versions of those. And we again have a lot more purified version of bicarbonate, which is again going into pharmaceutical applications. Now, this is an era where everybody talks about green chemistry. So we also have bicarbonate, which is made out of carbon capture. So it's a, completely different, while it's bicarbonate, but, the process or the way it is made makes it significantly greener. So it's a very different, cut or specialized cut coming out of that. So, one could certainly, it's not just about commodity, but one could always find applications. There are always niche ways of looking at it, which could help you create a specialized cut of commodities.
Thank you. And, I think we should start investing in salt rather than gold. Because I suddenly realized through your thought process कि आप तो नमक को सोना बना के बेच दोगे. So very interesting, but that's a very interesting thought process on how we continue to move up the value chain and because we deliver a value through the same molecule in different ways. I think a lot of learning in terms of what you communicated, including carbon capture and other things. But thank you very much for listening to us. It was an after lunch session, and I hope at least some of you were awake. But more importantly, I think an amazing panel, great learning from all people here, and that made my job very easy. Thank you very much.